This program will change your mindset towards the concept of leadership and show you that leadership is not a noun, it's a verb. It will also give you the keys to the secrets of how leaders induce change and achieve the impossible using only the human element. Let's quickly start with the philosophy. The health of the leadership is determined only by the ability of every teammate to challenge the status quo at all times. And unless we equip our teammates to ask the right questions, we cannot begin the process of defining and measuring the most powerful aspect of the human development, the leadership. First of all, let's start with the basics. Why do we pick a leader in the first place? Ever since the beginning of time, the leader was selected to use his abilities for the sake of survival of the herd, and not use the herd for his own survival, which makes the weakest link of the herd under way more focus than the leader. This goes to show how we need to place the prism in the right position to begin with. Now let's get to the mindset. Since the leadership is a practice to serve the purpose of the team, so unless there is a single purpose of everyone in the company, no matter what you do, there cannot be an effective leadership to begin with. And if the mindset is not right, the whole herd will succumb to the loss of this one purpose and will end up isolating themselves from the leader. This lopsidedness is very evident in major companies around the world. The recall of the purpose. Once we've established the purpose, we keep the question of why alive in the system and make it part of the culture to reflect upon small or big steps in the company. Remember, culture is the first indicator which determines the health of the leadership. And the best part is, if you can get the culture right, empowering everyone to get to the goal will happen on its own. This announcement of the purpose, or recall, is like a call in the train, telling everyone where the train is headed. This is how people in the train will keep on contributing towards getting there sooner and in better shape. Just some people coming together from 9 to 5 only form a large group, not a team. It's only the people who have the same purpose shall align themselves and contribute effectively towards getting there sooner. Once this is done with a fair amount of success, the confirmation bias of the group shall naturally oppose any resistance on their own. The clarity of purpose. Let's dig a little deeper to see how this works, since the next question after why would be how to convert leadership from a noun to a verb. The recall of the purpose is usually mishandled by poorly constructed, generic, or abstract vision statements. These are called Barnum statements, where people go abstract merely to empathize with the mindset of every single reader. This leads to only one thing. Everyone recalls the purpose on his own way of interpreting the vision or the why statement without any fault of their own. And the management, due to the curse of knowledge, cannot empathize with the people less than equipped and assume that the purpose is shared downstairs equally. A little difference in the top layers turns into a huge difference downstream due to the snowball effect. The human element. Let's go deeper still and see how and what is happening within the individual to realize the cause and effect and understand how important it is to know team dynamics. There are 5 chemicals which function just like a reactor inside everyone and are the cause of every single reaction that comes after any decision that the leader makes. This reactor can generate enough energy to achieve anything imaginable. Let's learn the codes of using this secret. Cortisol. Cortisol drives the employees with a lot more speed than any other factor. This is the hormone which plays the highest notes with the emotions than any other instrument. This is why insecurity seeps in anywhere so fast. This is also why rumor travels faster than any news. Years and years of work would fall like dominoes in seconds. Major corporations and companies plummet due to the sheer force of this single chemical. Stock markets collapse over a single fire of this bullet. Let's quickly analyze the situational leadership requirements during the outbreak of cortisol in the layers. The cause of cortisol is fear. So while you're building up pillars of the culture, you'll have to preemptively vaccinate the teammates from this as much as you can and train people to assess situations on a personal basis by creating a culture where people, even if afraid of everything else, are very used to asking questions from the management. This will lead to disclosure, and if the situation is not real, it would be controlled right away. Most situations which lead to cortisol outflow are based on assumptions, and even if the situation is real and threatening, it is statistically not possible that one situation affects every single person in the team. In both scenarios, the culture of confrontation and asking what's in the mind of anyone without hesitation is the best inhibitor of cortisol flow. The byproduct is a raise in acumen of every single person, since when the culture of questioning is prevalent in the company, the management, which is recipient of the questions naturally for the sake of its own survival, equips itself to answer the questions as a reverse feedback mechanism. Through this technique, great leaders have used the Semmelweis reflex, which is the most natural tendency to reject any new evidence that contradicts a paradigm, to a better use. As an example, imagine if we were to practice the famous Welsh theory of getting the wrong people off the bus. Not only that this will cause major cognitive dissonance in all the layers, since it's an alarm and will override the recall of the purpose, but this is so far from the core of the morality of leadership that it negates why we picked the leader in the first place. Since this puts people under risk of elimination, generates a high degree of cortisol in the system, and in turn lowers the ability of everyone to perform naturally. Measuring the ability of anyone under this situation would be unfair to begin with. This causes people to start underestimating themselves, even though they are way more skilled under normal circumstances. This phenomenon is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Oxytocin. Before we give the medicine for a cortisol-driven system, let's talk about the psychology that develops as a result of cortisol. Imagine a situation where the last man on the list would get eliminated every cycle of events. You can see how fast every single person will start to disregard the authority of leaders, and his own wisdom of survival will override the wisdom of the group, and he will bisect every single policy and manipulate the system merely to survive. It's not just the presence of cortisol, but also the lack of the most important chemical which makes up the fabric of any good team or a culture, called the oxytocin, the chemical of trust, faith, and love for a fellow human being. This is the chemical which opposes the every man for himself philosophy. Nothing else triggers the fundamental attribution error than the lack of oxytocin in the system. This is the chemical which makes the alpha watch the back of the other members of the herd, in contrast to a cortisol-driven culture where the alpha takes the bigger piece of the pie just because he's the alpha. Leaders with high acumen realize this and use this chemical surgically to create the Peltzman effect for the benefit of the whole team and shall achieve higher results. This is a reflex that great leaders use to achieve numbers and goals which are technically impossible to look at. So where, when, and how is oxytocin regulated, and how to put this in the culture? First of all, this chemical is built in the human system and is merely waiting for an act of trust, affection, or care, but mostly sacrifice to start flowing. Multiply that by every person in the team, and you turn a group of people into a high momentum team. Nothing builds the momentum of the team better than the fuel of oxytocin. Chemicals like endorphins and dopamine are selfish chemicals, and they are never released due to the performance of anyone else. And momentum makes you win bigger games. A train moving with a high momentum can easily break a 5-foot concrete wall on the track, which looks like a huge hurdle at the time, but a stationary train cannot even move even if an inch of a block is in the way. This is why great teams, when the momentum is built, they overcome big hurdles and bottlenecks merely on the basis of momentum. The purpose of dopamine is to make sure we get things done. Dopamine. The purpose of dopamine is to make sure we get things done. It helps people to go get the targets met. This is where you generate focus of everyone on the goal. This is why we break up the roads to achieving our purpose into realistic, measurable, and actionable milestones. This keeps the dopamine flowing. However, if you cannot make them realistic and measurable, this would not generate dopamine, and it just wouldn't work. The goals have to be tangible and visible at all times, since we are very visually oriented animals, and if we don't see it, we won't work half as hard to achieve it. For example, you can't get the performance of your employee high if you tell them that you get promoted if you achieve better or more. However, if you tell them that for every 20% of overachievement, you get to keep 5% of revenue, then you can see the difference in the results. This is why the abstract vision statements and generic purpose statements won't make the team work towards it, and people won't be able to make out the very definition of an achievement, hence won't really work towards it. Fatigue will come in early and would cause base-level friction against any good idea generated by anyone in the team. since lack of dopamine and endorphins will only cause the person to get tired and not go on that extra mile in order to achieve the milestone. Now multiply that by every member of the big team and you can see how less you'll be able to achieve. So make the goals visible and very clearly visible, realistic and measurable and tangible at all times, and celebrate them within the team to regulate the flow of these two amazing chemicals. Serotonin, the healing chemical. This is where you start the process of uplifting the wounded soldiers and heal the wounds of the fallen down. The honor and pride in the team is due to this chemical alone. Recognition of a great performance will instantly heal the wounds of years of falling back. Leaders use this serotonin to trigger the endowment effect in the team, which creates instant loyalty, and tag situations, events, stories, and achievements to the individuals and teams to keep the momentum and generate effective successors. The higher the token of recognition, the more effective it is. The chemical, however, has to be used very carefully, since an overdose may isolate the individual due to an inapt culture, and an amplified recognition at the same time is going to suppress the tone of the rest of the teammates. This, mixed with oxytocin, is the only way you ought to give it out. All in all, the clarity of purpose, the recall of the purpose, the tangibility of the goals, the carefulness of the stance, which can cause an undue fear and risk, the platform of trust, and the feeling of due pride are the recipe of owning up to the responsibility of leadership. This is where you can install a level 1 leader to practice authority, a level 2 leader to establish fellowship, a level 3 leader to establish fellowship, and a level 4 leader to earn respect. The level 5 leader practices humility, where he is the source of getting the good chemicals, and his pride is the way the weakest link of the herd is getting nourished.